Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and last time Beauregard fought the First Battle of Manassas. Now we follow him as he heads west. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from one of my online stores. Every little bit helps. Thank you. Divided, Beauregard's command was the Army of the Potomac, and Joseph E. Johnston's force was the Army of the Shenandoah. Together, they became simply the Army of the Potomac. The two commands stayed together after First Bull Run. This would probably have ruffled Beauregard's feathers because he liked having an independent command. However, Johnston was easygoing with his subordinates, particularly Beauregard, who he let assert free control over his half of the army. President Jefferson Davis didn't like this arrangement. The war of words between himself and Johnston and Beauregard was in its infancy, but it was already making things difficult in the Confederate War Department. In October, Beauregard recommended an officer for appointment as his chief ordnance officer for his half of the army. He also sent someone to recruit a rocket battery company in Richmond. Word came from the Secretary of War, Judah Benjamin, that Davis disapproved of the arrangement in the army, only wanting one chief of ordnance for the whole army, and informed Beauregard that he had no authority to raise such a company. Beauregard took this as an assault on his independence within the Army of the Potomac and wrote a harsh letter to Davis. Benjamin wrote to Beauregard that, "You are second in command of the whole Army of the Potomac, and not first in command of half the army." Benjamin also pointed out that there was no law allowing for the existence of a corps of troops, as Beauregard insisted he commanded. The rivalry between Beauregard and Benjamin continued, leading to the president attempting to end the hostilities between the two men. He wrote to Beauregard that Benjamin's words were that of a lawyer and shouldn't be taken too seriously, but the law was on Benjamin's side. "Now, my dear sir, let me entreat you to dismiss this small matter from your mind. In the hostile masses before you, you have a subject more worthy of your contemplation. The country needs all of your mind and your heart. My prayers always attend you, and with confidence I turn to you in the hour of peril." One of Beauregard's biographers explained, "At this point Beauregard could have closed the controversy with profit to himself. A more skilled disputant would have written a generous letter of semi-apology that would have made Benjamin look petty. Such a letter would probably have won him Davis's support in future dealings with the Secretary, but Beauregard was too fascinated with his pen to stop now." Beauregard wrote back that the Secretary needed to be more courteous in his communications, and that he hoped that Benjamin wouldn't be so legal as to straitjacket the army. The statement suggested that the army was above civil power and above the president. Davis snapped back at Beauregard, reminding him that the army wasn't above the law. The hostilities between Beauregard and Davis hit new heights when it got out to the public about the squabble. Rumors swirled that Davis removed Beauregard, that Beauregard stepped down, and that Davis was mad at the general because the general's name was put forward as president of the Confederacy. To address these rumors, Beauregard wrote a letter to the editor of the Richmond Whig newspaper. It said in part, "If certain minds cannot understand the difference between patriotism, the highest civic virtue, and office-seeking, the lowest civic occupation, I pity them from the bottom of my heart. Suffice it to say that I prefer the respect and esteem of my countrymen to the admiration and envy of the world. I am not, and never expect or desire to be, a candidate for any civil office in the gift of the people or of the executive. The acme of my ambition is, after having cast my might in defense of our sacred cause and assisted to the best part of my ability in securing our rights and independence as a nation, to retire into private life, my means then permitting never again to leave my home, unless to fight anew the battles of my country." The war between the President and Beauregard proceeded into a lull, but neither side forgot or forgave the other. Beauregard, into the late fall and early winter of 1861, urged the Confederate Congress to adopt a new national flag that didn't look so much like the United States flag. It was difficult to distinguish them in battle. Congress refused, stating that the Southern people felt too much attachment to the history of that flag and wanted some semblance of connection to it. So Beauregard, along with Congressman William Porter Miles and Joseph E. Johnston, helped construct a flag to only be carried in battle to distinguish the combatants. This battle flag would be situated on a field of red with a blue X and white stars inside of the X. The flags were created by the local ladies and distributed to the regiments of the Army of the Potomac in a ceremony in late November. In late January 1862, Congressman Roger Pryor came to the army at Centerville to meet with Beauregard. He told the general that the Military Affairs Committee and representatives from the Mississippi Valley states wanted to transfer him to the West to serve under Albert Sidney Johnston. They hoped that Beauregard's presence there would stimulate morale in the soldiers and the people. Beauregard took the assignment and set off by train for the West. He made numerous stops and made speeches, arriving at Bowling Green, Kentucky, the center of the Confederate defensive line in the West, its right flank anchored on Cumberland Gap, and its left flank anchored on Columbus, Kentucky. Two forts, Fort Henry and Fort Donelson, housed about 5,000 men total, and sat on the center left of the line. On February 6th, while Beauregard lay on his sickbed in Bowling Green from a throat operation he had received in Virginia, Ulysses S. Grant captured Fort Henry. Johnston and General William Hardee came to Beauregard to discuss the next steps to be taken. Beauregard recommended concentrating all of the Confederate forces at Fort Donelson and attack Grant. Johnston said that would give up Nashville, Tennessee to the Union Army under Don Carlos Buell, so it was ultimately decided to fall back on the Tennessee capital. Beauregard was to take command of the forces at Columbus. The two halves of the army were separated, and Beauregard advocated for the force at Columbus to pull back, maybe to Jackson, Tennessee, and defend the Mississippi River by bolstering forces at Island No. 10 and Fort Pillow. Johnston essentially gave him full rein to operate as he saw fit. Disgruntled about evacuating Bowling Green, Beauregard wrote to a congressional friend that, "I am taking the helm when the ship is already on the breakers, and with few sailors to man it. How it is to be extricated from its present perilous condition, Providence alone can determine. We must defeat the enemy somewhere to give confidence to our friends. We must give up some minor points and concentrate our forces to save the most important ones, or we will lose all of them in succession." When Fort Donelson fell, Beauregard began evacuating Columbus and creating a new defensive line that ran from Corinth, Mississippi to Memphis, Tennessee, to protect the vital railroad hubs and block the Union from invading further into the Confederacy. Johnston informed Beauregard that Nashville would also be evacuated because of the approach of Buell's army from Kentucky. Beauregard began to envision a grand campaign. He sent couriers to the governors of Mississippi, Louisiana, Tennessee, and Alabama, informing them that the Mississippi Valley was going to fall if he didn't receive reinforcements to increase his number to 40,000 troops. With that army, he proposed to strike out for Paducah, Kentucky, capture the mouths of the Cumberland and Tennessee rivers, then threaten or capture St. Louis, hopefully with the help of 10,000 men commanded by Earl Van Dorn. Beauregard's vision was more of an army commander's plan than that of someone who commanded just a wing of Johnston's force. But Johnston wasn't acting as an army commander. He was content coordinating the evacuation of his troops from Nashville. The governors didn't send troops to Beauregard, but the Confederate government did. Troops from New Orleans and around 10,000 men from Braxton Bragg's force at Pensacola, Florida, made their way to Corinth, Mississippi. Beauregard named his command the Army of the Mississippi and appealed to the planners of the Mississippi Valley to assist with throwing back the Yankees. He wrote, "We want cannon, and I, your general, entrusted with the command of the army, embodied of your sons, your kinsmen, and your neighbors, do now call on you to send your plantation bells to the nearest railroad depot, subject to my order to be melted into cannon for the defense of your plantations. Who will not cheerfully and promptly send me his bells under such circumstances? Be of good cheer, but time is precious." A few bells were sent, but ironworks around the South had enough metal to make the cannons that Beauregard needed. When Johnston made it to Corinth, he and Beauregard discussed how to deal with Grant. The Union general moved his force to a location called Pittsburg Landing and was waiting for Buell's army to arrive. Both Confederate generals agreed that they needed to attack Grant before Buell arrived. When Johnston offered Beauregard command of the entire army and said that he would move to Memphis and coordinate the department, Beauregard declined the offer. One of Beauregard's biographers gave two possibilities for Johnston's offer. Under a storm of criticism for the disasters in the West, he may have realized that he had erred in not exercising central command, and was now trying belatedly to assume his proper function, or he may still have wished to avoid large responsibility by placing the greater part of his forces under Beauregard's direct command. On April 2nd, reports came in that the Federals were moving and building up strength, it was determined to move against Grant's army at Pittsburg Landing.